The day had started like any other at the small community music school. The sound of piano notes drifted down the long hallway, mixing with the faint hum of conversation and laughter from students waiting for their lessons. In the corner near the stairway, a woman quietly pushed her mop bucket, humming softly under her breath. Her name was Lena. She had been working there for more than a year, cleaning classrooms, arranging chairs, and making sure everything stayed neat for the teachers and students. She never made much noise when she worked. Most people hardly noticed her, though everyone knew her as the kind lady who always smiled and greeted them politely. Her eyes carried a calm warmth, the kind that made even the most nervous student feel at ease when they passed her in the hall. But apart from that, no one knew anything about her. Lena was never late, never complained, and never spoke much unless someone talked to her first. She wore simple clothes, her hair tied back neatly, and she always carried herself with quiet grace. When the teachers gathered for coffee breaks or chatted in the staff room, she would walk in to refill the sugar jar or wipe the counter, smiling faintly before leaving again. They often thanked her, but few ever stopped to talk beyond that. One afternoon, as the sound of a piano lesson floated out of room 3, Lena paused by the door. A young boy was struggling through a piece, his fingers hitting wrong notes, the teacher trying to guide him with patience. Lena stayed just long enough to listen, leaning slightly against the wall with her cleaning cloth in hand. Her head tilted a little as the melody stumbled forward. There was something in her eyes, a deep, far-away look, like someone remembering a forgotten song. The teacher noticed her standing there and smiled. "Enjoying the music, Lena?" she asked kindly. Lena smiled back, embarrassed that she'd been caught listening. "It sounds lovely," she said softly. "It will sound better once he learns to keep time," the teacher joked, making the boy laugh nervously. Lena nodded and quietly went back to her work. Every day after that, whenever a piano lesson was in progress, Lena found herself lingering nearby. Not in an intrusive way, she would dust shelves or straighten chairs while her ears followed the music. She seemed drawn to the sound, as if the notes pulled something from deep within her. Sometimes she even mouthed silent counts or moved her fingers slightly against the air, the way pianists do when they imagine playing. But she never touched the piano. To most people, Lena was just a hard-working cleaner with a gentle smile. But beneath that calm surface, she carried memories of a very different life. Years ago, before the gray in her hair and the quiet life she lived now, she had once known the touch of piano keys like they were a part of her own soul. Back then, she would wake up before dawn to practice for hours, losing herself in the music until the world outside didn't exist. But that was another lifetime, one she no longer spoke of. One morning, the school was preparing for an upcoming recital. The teachers were busy arranging the program, rehearsing with students, and adjusting the decorations in the hall. Lena worked silently, helping wherever she could. She moved extra chairs, polished the piano bench, and made sure every corner of the hall looked perfect. As the day went on, one of the senior teachers, Mr. Roberts, called out, "Lena, could you please help us carry this extra stand?" "Of course," she replied softly, walking over with quick steps. He smiled at her as they worked side by side. "You must be tired of hearing all this piano practice every day," he said with a small laugh. Lena shook her head gently. "No, sir, I like it. Music makes the air feel alive." Mr. Roberts chuckled. "That's a nice way to put it." He didn't think much of it, but those words stayed with him later. That evening, after everyone had left, Lena stayed behind to finish mopping the hallway. The lights were dim and the silence felt peaceful. Passing by the empty recital hall, she noticed the grand piano still uncovered. The instrument looked beautiful under the soft yellow lights, its black surface shining like glass. She stopped at the doorway, her hands tightening slightly around the mop handle. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. Her heart began to beat a little faster. The sight of the piano stirred something deep within her, a mixture of longing and sadness. Almost without thinking, she walked toward it. Her steps were slow, hesitant. She reached out and ran her fingers lightly across the smooth surface of the keys. It felt familiar and strange at the same time, like meeting an old friend after many years. She pressed one key. The sound was soft, pure, and beautiful. She pressed another, then another, and suddenly the room wasn't empty anymore. The air filled with the gentle echo of notes blending together. Her fingers moved tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, A simple melody came out, something she remembered from her youth. Her eyes closed as her hands found the rhythm on their own. The music flowed naturally, tender and emotional, as if it had been waiting all these years to be heard again. When the final note faded, Lena opened her eyes slowly. She smiled faintly, then sighed. Just for a moment, she whispered to herself, before covering the piano and turning off the lights. The next morning, a few students arrived early and noticed her again, polishing the same piano. They greeted her politely, and one of them asked, "Miss Lena, do you play?" The question caught her off guard. "Oh, me? No, not anymore," she replied quickly, her cheeks turning slightly pink. "Not anymore," another student repeated curiously. "So you used to?" Lena smiled and shrugged. A long time ago. They didn't ask further, and she didn't explain. But the small exchange left a quiet curiosity among them. A few days later, during a lunch break, a group of teachers sat around talking in the staff lounge. One of them, a younger piano instructor named Clara, mentioned the incident. "You know, I think Lena used to play piano," she said with a grin. The students asked her, and she admitted it. The others laughed lightly. "Lena, really?" one of them said, surprised. "I can't picture that. Maybe she played a few chords as a hobby," another added. "She's too shy to perform." Someone joked, "We should get her to try one of the advanced pieces, see if she can handle it." They all laughed, assuming she wouldn't dare. But what began as a casual joke slowly turned into a challenge among them. It would be funny, they thought, to see if the quiet cleaning lady could even manage a few notes of something complex. None of them meant it cruelly. It was more out of light-hearted curiosity. Later that week, when the rehearsal hall was free, a few teachers were sitting around the piano discussing the next recital pieces. Lena was nearby, wiping dust off the windowsills. "Lena," one of them called playfully, "we were just talking about you." She turned, a little startled. "Me?" "Yes. We heard you used to play piano." "Is that true?" Lena hesitated, unsure what to say. "I used to, many years ago," she admitted softly. "Really?" said Mr. Roberts, smiling kindly. "Then maybe you should play something for us. We could use some music after all this paperwork." The others chuckled, and someone added, "Yes, come on, Lena, play something difficult." "Let's see how good you are." She blushed and shook her head. "Oh no, I couldn't. I haven't played in so long. I wouldn't even remember where to start." But they kept insisting, half joking, half serious. "Just one song." "We won't judge," said one. "Play anything you like." Lena looked down at her hands, feeling torn. Part of her wanted to refuse politely and walk away. But another part of her, the part that still dreamed in music, longed to touch the piano again. Finally, she smiled shyly and said, "Maybe some other day." The teachers laughed and let it go for the moment, but the idea lingered in the air. They didn't realize that their small challenge would soon uncover something none of them expected. For now, Lena returned to her quiet routine, sweeping floors and arranging chairs. But inside her heart, something had started to stir again, something she thought she had lost forever. And while no one at the school paid much attention to the quiet woman working in the background, fate was quietly setting the stage for the day when she would sit at that piano again and remind everyone what true talent, humility, and heart really sound like. The next few days passed quietly at the music school, though a certain buzz began to spread among the teachers and students. Ever since the day they had teased Lena about playing the piano, people had started to look at her a little differently. Not in a bad way, just curious. The calm, humble woman who was always seen sweeping the floors or carrying music books now carried a small air of mystery. Students whispered about it in the hallways. "Do you think she really used to play?" one girl asked another while packing up her sheet music. "Maybe she's just shy," the other replied. Some even joked, "What if she's secretly amazing and just hiding it?" Lena overheard bits of their conversations sometimes. She didn't mind. She just smiled quietly and continued her work. But inside she felt a strange flutter, something between fear and excitement. It had been years since she had played in front of anyone. The piano used to be her world, but that world had faded away when life demanded she take a different path. One morning, as she wiped down the windows in the main hall, she saw Mr. Roberts and a few teachers standing near the piano chatting. They noticed her and waved her over. "Lena," Mr. Roberts called kindly. "Come here a moment." She set aside her cloth and walked closer, unsure what they wanted. "We were just talking about the recital next week," he began. "Some of the students are nervous about performing. We thought it might be nice to have a little fun today, maybe a small challenge." Lena tilted her head slightly. "A challenge?" "Yes," said Clara, the younger piano instructor, grinning. "We thought you could try playing something for us. Just one piece. Something simple, if you like. We all want to hear how you play." Lena's eyes widened slightly. "Oh no, I don't think I can. It's been too long." But the group insisted in a friendly way. "Come on, Lena, just one song," said another teacher. "You're among friends here. No one will judge you." She laughed nervously, glancing at the shiny black piano. "It's not that I don't want to. I just haven't touched a piano in years. My hands probably forgot everything." "That's fine," said Mr. Roberts gently. "It's just for fun. Tell you what, why don't you try this?" He picked up a sheet from the nearby stand and handed it to her. Lena looked down at the paper. Her heart skipped a beat. The title read Ballade No. 1 in G minor, Chopin. It was a famously difficult piece, one that even advanced pianists struggled to play perfectly. She looked back at the teachers, unsure if they were serious. "This is very difficult," she said softly. "That's why we thought it would be fun," Clara replied playfully. "It's okay if you can't finish it. Just play the beginning. We won't laugh, promise." Their tone was light-hearted, almost teasing. They didn't mean any harm, but they truly didn't expect her to play well. They thought it would be a nice way to lighten the mood during a busy day. Lena smiled faintly, sensing their amusement. "You really want me to try this?" she asked. "Yes, absolutely," said Mr. Roberts. "Let's see what you've got, Lena." A few students, hearing the commotion, peeked in from the hallway. The idea of seeing the quiet cleaner play piano was too strange to miss. Within minutes, several more gathered by the door, whispering and giggling softly. Lena stood beside the piano, her heart beating faster. She hesitated, her hand slightly trembling. For a moment, she thought about refusing politely and walking away. But something deep inside her pushed her forward. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was that small spark she had tried to hide for years. The spark that once made her spend endless nights practicing under dim light. "All right," she said softly, taking a slow breath. "I'll try." The teachers cheered lightly and stepped aside to give her space. Lena pulled out the piano bench and sat down carefully. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath her skin. It had been so long since she had done this. The smell of polished wood, the quiet anticipation in the air, it all felt like stepping back into another life. The room grew quiet. The laughter stopped. Even the students leaning at the door fell silent. Lena took one more deep breath, straightened her back, and placed both hands on the keys. The first few notes came out soft and uncertain. She pressed them gently, testing her own memory. Then, as if something inside her awoke, her touch changed. Her fingers began to move more confidently, gliding over the keys with a fluid rhythm. The melody that filled the room was rich, emotional, and perfectly balanced between strength and grace. The teachers froze. Their playful smiles faded as they exchanged surprised glances. Lena continued to play, completely lost in the music now. Her hands moved faster, each note flowing into the next with precision and feeling. The difficult runs that most students struggled with came out effortlessly. Her fingers danced across the piano like they had never forgotten, like they had been waiting all these years for this very moment. The music grew deeper, stronger, full of emotion that seemed to come straight from her soul. The room felt alive. No one dared to speak or move. When the final note finally faded, there was silence. For a few seconds, no one even breathed. Then someone whispered, "Oh my God." Lena looked up, suddenly aware that everyone was staring at her. She smiled awkwardly, her cheeks pink. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to go that far, I just remembered." Mr. Roberts blinked in disbelief. "Lena," he said slowly, that was incredible." Clara stepped forward, her expression full of shock and admiration. How did you do that? That piece, no one here can play it like that." Lena looked down at her hands and smiled faintly. "I used to play when I was young," she said softly. Before life got in the way, the teachers gathered around her, full of questions now. "You played professionally? Where did you learn? Why didn't you tell anyone?" She shook her head humbly. "It was a long time ago. I studied at a conservatory for a few years. I even performed once or twice. But after I got married, I had to stop. My husband fell ill and we needed money. So I took any job I could find. I haven't really played since." There was a long, respectful silence. The teachers who had teased her moments earlier now felt a mix of guilt and awe. They realized how little they had known about the woman who worked quietly among them every day. One of the students stepped forward from the doorway and said softly, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Lena smiled at the young girl, her eyes glistening slightly. "Thank you," she said. For the rest of that day, the story spread through the school like wildfire. Everyone was talking about how the humble cleaning lady had stunned the teachers with a performance worthy of a concert pianist. During the next break, students crowded around her, asking if she could teach them a few tricks. "Miss Lena, how do you make it sound so smooth?" one boy asked. Another said, "Can you play that again, please?" Lena laughed softly and shook her head. "Maybe another time," she said kindly. "Music needs to come from the heart. If you feel it, your hands will follow." That evening, as the school emptied and the hallways grew quiet again, Lena stayed behind to clean. The piano still sat uncovered, reflecting the dim golden light of the lamps. She walked past it, then stopped and turned around. She sat down again, just for herself this time. Her fingers moved across the keys, playing a gentle lullaby she used to love. There was no audience now, no pressure, just her and the music. Her eyes closed and a small, peaceful smile formed on her face. She didn't notice that Mr. Roberts was standing quietly at the doorway listening. He didn't want to interrupt. He just stood there, deeply moved. When she finished, he finally spoke. "Lena," he said softly. She turned, surprised. "Oh, Mr. Roberts, I didn't see you there," he smiled warmly. "You shouldn't be cleaning this hall anymore," he said. "You belong at that piano." She looked down, unsure how to respond. "I appreciate that, sir, but I'm just happy to help." He shook his head gently. "No, Lena, you're more than that. You have a gift, and it's time people see it." Lena didn't answer, but her eyes softened. Deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. When she left the building that night, she walked a little slower, the cool evening air brushing her face. For the first time in years, she felt alive again. The piano keys still echoed in her heart, and she realized that maybe, just maybe, her story with music wasn't over yet. The next morning at the music school, a quiet excitement hung in the air. Word had spread fast among the teachers and students about what had happened the day before. Lena, the humble woman who cleaned classrooms and carried sheet music, had stunned everyone with her piano playing. Some whispered in the hallways, some laughed in disbelief, and others simply shook their heads in awe. Nobody had imagined she could play like that, and most couldn't stop thinking about it. Lena arrived at the school as usual, carrying her mop bucket and cleaning supplies. She smiled politely at the students she passed, pretending nothing had changed. But she felt a strange tension inside her, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She knew that today, more than ever, all eyes might be on her, whether she wanted them to be or not. As she cleaned the long hallway, a group of students approached cautiously. "Miss Lena," one of them said softly, "could we hear you play again sometime?" Lena paused, her hands gripping the mop handle. I don't know if I should," she replied quietly, smiling gently. "It's not for everyone to hear. Music comes from the heart, and if your heart isn't ready, it won't sound right." The students looked at each other and nodded, understanding more than they could express. "We just wanted to know," another whispered. "No pressure." As she resumed her work, the teachers gathered in a small huddle near the piano. Clara, still amazed from the day before, turned to Mr. Roberts. "We underestimated her," she said quietly. "She's incredible. That wasn't just practice, it was professional level." Mr. Roberts nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of guilt and admiration. "I didn't think someone like Lena could be that good. I assumed she had never played seriously. I was wrong." One of the other teachers, who had been skeptical the previous day, crossed his arms. "Do you think she would be willing to perform for the recital? Not just for fun, but seriously?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know, she's very private. She doesn't even talk about her past. But if she agreed, it would be amazing. Everyone would be inspired." They all fell silent, realizing they had no idea how to ask her without making her uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Lena continued her work, unaware of the discussions around her. She moved from room to room, dusting shelves, arranging chairs, and polishing floors. Every so often she glanced at the piano. Her fingers itched to touch the keys again, but she held herself back. The thought of performing in front of everyone again filled her with both fear and excitement. Later that afternoon, the school director called her into the office. Lena walked in quietly, unsure what to expect. The director smiled warmly. "Lena, may I sit?" he asked. She nodded and took a seat across from him. "I wanted to talk to you about yesterday," he began. "I heard what happened. You're playing. It was remarkable. Truly remarkable." Lena lowered her gaze, feeling both embarrassed and proud. "It was nothing," she said softly. "I just remembered a piece I used to know." The director shook his head. "No, Lena. It was not nothing. It was extraordinary. I have an idea, but I need to know if you would consider it." She looked up, curious. "What is it?" "We have an upcoming recital and we want to feature a solo performance. I know this is sudden, and I understand if you refuse, but would you consider playing?" Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had not thought about performing in years. The idea of sitting in front of a full audience, playing a challenging piece again, filled her with fear. But it also stirred a deep excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't played in so long. What if I make mistakes?" The director leaned forward. "It doesn't have to be perfect, Lena. It's about sharing your gift, about inspiring others. We want them to see what dedication and talent look like." She nodded slowly, her mind racing with memories of her past life. The hours she had spent practicing, the late nights filled with music, the applause from audiences long gone. It all came rushing back. "I'll think about it," she said softly. The director smiled. "That's all I ask. Just think about it." As Lena walked back to her cleaning duties, she felt a mix of emotions. Fear, excitement, doubt, and hope all swirled inside her. She knew that if she agreed, her life would change in a small but significant way. She could no longer remain just the quiet woman who cleaned classrooms. The piano called to her, and she had a choice to make. The next day, the teachers gathered near the piano again. "We should ask her to try another piece," Clara whispered. "Not too complicated, just something to see if she's willing." Mr. Roberts shook his head. "Be careful. We don't want to pressure her. She's private, and we need to respect that. But if she's willing, it could be amazing." When Lena entered the hall, they greeted her warmly, but cautiously. She smiled politely, carrying her mop bucket as usual. The students watched from a distance, curious but hesitant. "Lena," Clara said softly, "we were wondering, would you like to try playing for us again? Just something small if you want." Lena hesitated, glancing at the piano. The keys seemed to shine under the afternoon light, almost calling to her. Her hands itched to touch them, and her heart raced. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll play." The teachers and students gathered around, creating a small, respectful circle. Lena walked slowly to the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar excitement and nervousness that always came before playing. As soon as she pressed the first notes, the room changed. The soft, delicate melody grew stronger, more confident. Her fingers moved naturally, almost as if they had never forgotten. The piece was complex, full of intricate runs and sudden changes in tempo, but she played with ease and grace. The teachers exchanged astonished looks. Clara whispered, "She's flawless." The students were mesmerized. They had never seen anyone play like this in person. The notes filled the room, moving with emotion and precision, telling a story that no words could express. Some of the younger students had tears in their eyes, not understanding fully why, but feeling the power of the music deep in their hearts. When the last note faded, the room was silent for a moment. Then Mr. Roberts clapped slowly, followed by the other teachers. The students joined in, some still wide-eyed with amazement. Lena stood quietly, her hands resting on the keys. "It's just a piece I remember," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the applause. Clara stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Lena, it's more than that. It's incredible. You have a gift, and we need to share it with everyone. Please, let us help you do that." Lena looked down, overwhelmed by the attention. She had always been humble, never seeking praise or recognition. But now, seeing the admiration in their eyes, she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. I will think about it," she said again, her voice steadying. "I want to, but I need time." The director, who had been watching quietly, nodded. "Take all the time you need, Lena, but know this. You've already inspired more people than you realize. Your music touched all of us, even in just these few moments." As the day went on, the atmosphere at the school changed. People moved differently around Lena, no longer seeing just the quiet woman who cleaned the floors. She was someone remarkable, someone whose past had been hidden behind kindness and humility. Throughout the week, students and teachers found excuses to stop by her cleaning area, asking about music, sharing their favorite pieces, or just watching her smile politely. Every time she walked past the piano, her fingers itched to touch it again. The pull of the music was irresistible, and she knew it was only a matter of time before she would play for them once more. That evening, after everyone had left, Lena stayed behind. She sat at the piano, her fingers moving lightly over the keys. She didn't play a complex piece this time. Instead, she let her hands wander, improvising a simple melody. The notes flowed freely, soft and warm, filling the empty hall with music that spoke of memory, longing, and quiet joy. She smiled, closing her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt connected to the music and to herself. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a part of her, a part she had never truly lost. And as the moonlight streamed through, the windows reflecting on the polished black surface of the piano, Lena knew deep down that this was only the beginning. Soon the world would hear her story, and the music that had once been her secret would finally shine. The next few days at the music school felt different. There was a quiet hum of curiosity and excitement in the air. Students whispered in the hallways about Lena, the woman who had amazed everyone with her piano playing. Teachers discussed her quietly in staff meetings, some still shaking their heads in disbelief. No one could quite understand how someone so humble and quiet could possess such talent. For Lena, the days felt strange too. She continued her work of cleaning, organizing, and helping the school run smoothly, but now every glance toward the piano made her heart skip a beat. She had always loved the instrument, but these past few days it felt like a living thing, calling her back to the life she had left behind. One afternoon, as she was polishing the windows in the recital hall, Clara approached her quietly.
"Lena," she said softly, "may I sit with you for a moment?"
Lena turned, surprised, but nodded. Clara sat down on one of the chairs, her expression serious but kind. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said gently. "You're not," Lena replied. "Is something wrong?" "No, not at all," Clara said quickly. I want to understand. You're an amazing pianist, more than anyone here could imagine, and I can see that there's a story behind it. If you're willing, I'd like to hear it." Lena hesitated. She rarely spoke about her past, and the memories were sometimes painful. But there was something in Clara's gentle tone that made her feel safe, like she could tell a part of her story without fear of judgment. She took a deep breath. "I suppose it's time someone knows," she said softly. Clara leaned forward, attentive and patient. Lena began quietly, almost to herself at first. "I grew up in a small town. We didn't have much money, but my parents loved music. My father played the violin and my mother sang. From a young age, I was drawn to the piano. I would sit by the old upright in our living room and try to mimic the notes I heard. At first it was clumsy, but over time I learned to play more accurately." Clara nodded, encouraging her to continue. "My parents saved every penny to let me study music seriously," Lena said. "When I was a teenager, I got a scholarship to a music conservatory. I left home for the first time, alone, to study piano professionally. Those years were hard but beautiful. I practiced for hours every day. My hands would hurt, my back would ache, but I loved every moment. I competed in local competitions, performed in recitals, and sometimes even played in front of large audiences. It was my world, the one place I truly belonged. Clara's eyes widened. You performed professionally? She asked softly. Yes, Lena replied, her voice almost a whisper. Not for long, but enough to know that music was my life. I dreamed of becoming a concert pianist, traveling, sharing my music with the world. But life had other plans. She paused, taking a deep breath. Her fingers fiddled with the edge of her cleaning cloth, a nervous gesture she hadn't noticed. I met someone I loved, she continued. We married young, and soon after my husband became ill. It was serious. I couldn't leave him. I had to take care of him, and we needed money to survive. Music, my piano. It became impossible to continue. I had to give it up. Clara reached out, placing a hand lightly on Lena's shoulder. I'm so sorry, she said softly. That must have been incredibly difficult, Lena nodded. It was. I had to let go of my dreams for a time. I took small jobs, anything I could find, just to keep us afloat. Eventually, my husband passed away. After that, I kept going, but I never returned to performing. The piano became a distant memory, something I loved but thought I had lost forever. She looked down, her eyes glistening slightly. Until now. Clara remained quiet, letting her speak. Lena's voice grew steadier as she continued. When I play now, it's like coming home. I feel alive again. But I'm not sure if I'm ready to show the world who I am fully. I've spent so many years hiding behind quiet work, helping others, never wanting attention. And now, everyone here has seen a glimpse of what I can do. It's both exciting and frightening. Clara nodded thoughtfully. I understand, but Lena, the way you play, it's not just talent. It's passion, it's life experience, it's every emotion you've ever felt. You inspire people, not just students, not just teachers, but everyone who hears you. That is something rare and beautiful. You shouldn't hide it. Lena looked at her, unsure. I want to share it, she admitted softly. But I don't know if I have the courage. People will expect perfection. And what if I fail? Clara smiled gently. Perfection isn't the point. Your music tells a story, your story. People will feel it, whether it's perfect or not. And you need to play for yourself too, not just for them. Lena nodded slowly, feeling a warmth in her chest. She realized Clara was right. The piano had always been her voice, her way of expressing what words could not. She had been silent for so long, and now the music was calling her back. Over the next few days, Lena began to practice quietly in the empty recital hall after school. She was careful to keep it private, just herself and the piano. At first, her fingers felt stiff, and her memory of the pieces was slow to return. But with each day, her confidence grew. She rediscovered the nuances of the pieces she had once played flawlessly, feeling the flow of each note, the rise and fall of the melodies, the emotion behind every chord. Students began noticing her presence more often, peeking in to see her play. They whispered among themselves, amazed at how the woman they had once overlooked could now fill the room with such beautiful music. Teachers, too, came by quietly, standing at the doorway to listen. No one interrupted her, respecting the privacy of her practice. One afternoon, as she played a complex Chopin piece she had once performed in competitions, Mr. Roberts entered the hall quietly. He stood at the doorway, watching her hands move over the keys, listening to the fluidity and precision of each note. He was silent, not wanting to distract her, but he felt a deep respect and admiration for the woman who had given so much, hidden so much, and now finally was finding her voice again. When Lena finished, she turned slightly, surprised to see him there. Oh, Mr. Roberts, she said softly. I didn't hear you come in. He smiled warmly. I couldn't help listening. That was extraordinary. Lena shook her head humbly. It's just practice, she said. No, he replied firmly. It's more than that. It's talent, dedication, and heart. You've been through so much, and yet your music, it speaks of everything you've felt. People need to hear this, Lena. Not just a few notes in passing, but the full story. The world deserves it. She looked down, her fingers still brushing the keys. I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid of performing in front of everyone again. Afraid of being judged. Mr. Roberts nodded. That's natural. But fear doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It means it's important. And I promise we'll support you. You won't be alone. For the first time in years, Lena felt a glimmer of courage. Maybe she could do it. Maybe she could face her fear and share her music again. The thought of returning to the stage, of letting the world hear her story, filled her with both trepidation and hope. Over the next week, she began working with Clara and a few trusted teachers. They helped her prepare for the recital, selecting pieces that showcased her talent while respecting her emotional journey. They rehearsed quietly, offering guidance, encouragement, and support. Lena's confidence grew steadily. She discovered that despite the years away from the piano, her fingers remembered, her heart remembered, and with every practice session, the woman who had once been hidden in the background of a busy music school was slowly reclaiming her voice. By the end of the week, it was clear to everyone that Lena was ready. Not just to play, but to tell her story through music. The teachers who had once underestimated her now looked at her with admiration and respect. The students who had laughed at the idea of a cleaning lady playing piano were now in awe, inspired by her courage and skill. And for Lena herself, the journey was just beginning. She had faced her fear, revisited her past, and allowed herself to reconnect with the music she loved. The piano was no longer just an instrument, it was a part of her, a part that had survived time, loss, and hardship. And soon, the world outside the empty halls of the school would hear her story, feel her music, and witness the extraordinary talent of a humble woman who had been quietly waiting for her moment to shine. The day of the recital arrived, and the music school was buzzing with excitement. Students rushed about, rehearsing their pieces, checking their sheet music, and nervously adjusting their clothes. Parents sat in the audience, chatting softly, while the teachers moved from student to student, offering last-minute encouragement. Amid all this, Lena moved quietly through the hallways, her cleaning supplies tucked away, her heart beating faster than it had in years. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for in secret, the moment she had both dreaded and dreamed about. Today she would play in front of an audience again. Not a few teachers or curious students, but a hall full of people who had come expecting music, unaware that the woman who had once been invisible in their midst would soon astonish them. Lena took a deep breath as she entered the recital hall. The room smelled of polished wood and flowers, a soft mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation lingering in the air. The grand piano stood in the center of the stage, gleaming under the warm lights. It was waiting for her, and she could feel it calling her name. Clara approached her gently, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're ready, Lena," she said softly. "Just play as you always do. Let the music tell your story." Lena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll try," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The students began their performances first. Some played simple pieces, others tackled more complex works. Lena watched quietly from backstage, her fingers itching to touch the piano. She felt a mix of pride for the students and anticipation for her own turn. Every note they played reminded her of the path she had walked to reach this point, of the years she had spent away from the instrument she loved. Finally, it was her turn. A hush fell over the audience as Clara walked to the microphone and introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored today to have a special performance. This is someone who has been a part of our school quietly for years, and now we get to experience the extraordinary talent she has always carried with her. Please welcome Lena." The applause was polite at first, curious and hesitant, but it quickly grew as Lena stepped onto the stage. She moved gracefully to the piano, her hands brushing over the keys as she sat down. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the memory of her past performances and the countless hours of practice fill her mind. Then, she began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost shy, as if testing the air. But then slowly confidence filled her hands. The melody grew richer, stronger, flowing effortlessly from her fingers. Every note was precise, every chord full of emotion. The piece she had chosen was challenging, one that many professional pianists would struggle to perform perfectly, but she played it with ease, grace, and soul. The audience was mesmerized. Teachers leaned forward, their mouths slightly open in awe. Parents exchanged glances, unable to believe what they were hearing. Students watched wide-eyed, some whispering to each other, "She's amazing. She's incredible." The music carried a story of its own, telling of longing, of loss, of hope, and of resilience. Those who listened felt it deeply, as if Lena's hands were speaking directly to their hearts. She had lived through pain and hardship, and each note reflected the emotions she had experienced. The joy of her youth, the love she had lost, the years she had given up, and now, the quiet triumph of returning to the thing she loved most. In the front row, Mr. Roberts sat with tears in his eyes, Unable to hide the emotion stirring within him, Clara's face was wet with tears as well, her hand covering her mouth to stifle a sob. No one had expected that a woman who had quietly swept floors and carried music sheets could command a stage like this. As the piece reached its climax, Lena's fingers danced over the keys with breathtaking speed and accuracy. The notes rose and fell, flowing like a river, yet every sound was deliberate, precise, and filled with expression. There was power, elegance, and grace in every movement. Every person in the room felt the music enveloping them, lifting them and moving them in ways words could never explain. When the final note rang out, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, suspended in awe. Then, like an eruption of realization, the audience stood and erupted into applause. The sound was thunderous, heartfelt, and overwhelming. People cheered, clapped, and some even whistled. The students who had once overlooked her stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend that the quiet woman they had known all this time possessed such a gift. Lena's hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly as she looked up to see the sea of faces staring back at her. She felt a rush of emotion, relief, joy, and an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She had done it. She had returned to the stage, shared her music, and in doing so, shared a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. The applause continued for several minutes, with people rising from their seats, some clapping so hard their hands were sore, others wiping tears from their eyes. The teachers, who had once laughed at the idea of her playing a difficult piece, now looked at her with admiration and respect. They realized they had underestimated the depth of her talent, the strength of her spirit, and the beauty of her humility. After the applause subsided, Lena stood and took a small, humble bow. Her face was wet with tears, but she smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. The audience continued to clap, some calling out her name, others simply nodding in silent awe. Backstage, Clara rushed to her side. "Lena," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. "That was beyond words. You've touched everyone here. No one will ever forget this performance." Lena shook her head, laughing softly through her tears. I just played what I remembered. I didn't think it would feel so powerful." "It was powerful because it came from your heart," Clara said. "You've lived a life full of experiences, and it all came through the music." Everyone could feel it. Mr. Roberts joined them, smiling warmly. "You've inspired everyone here, Lena. Not just with your talent, but with your courage and humility. You've reminded us all what true passion and dedication look like." Over the next few days, the recital became the talk of the school. Students who had once whispered and laughed now approached her with admiration. "Miss Lena, you're incredible," one boy said shyly. "I want to play like that someday." Another student, a young girl, said softly, "I never knew someone so quiet could be so amazing. You make me want to work harder." Lena smiled at them, humbled by their words. "Music is about patience, practice, and love," she told them gently. "If you truly love it, your heart will guide your hands." The teachers began discussing ways to feature her more in the school. They wanted her to teach master classes, mentor advanced students, and even perform at school events regularly. Lena was hesitant at first, unsure if she wanted so much attention, but slowly she realized that sharing her gift was not just about herself. It was about inspiring others, giving them hope and showing them the beauty of music. One evening, as the school quieted down and the last students left, Lena stayed behind to practice. She sat at the piano, her fingers moving lightly over the keys, playing a gentle, reflective piece. The hall was empty, but the memory of the applause still lingered. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, she felt complete, connected to her music, her past, and her future. The performance had changed more than just the perception of those around her. It had changed Lena herself. She realized that talent, no matter how long it is hidden, never truly fades. It waits patiently for the right moment to be rediscovered, and when it is, it can touch hearts, inspire minds, and remind everyone that courage and humility are as powerful as any skill or gift. By the end of the week, Lena was no longer just the quiet woman in the hallways. She had become a symbol of hope and inspiration. Students sought her guidance, teachers respected her opinion, and even parents asked if she would give lessons or perform again. She accepted modestly, always keeping her humility, but she knew deep down that her life had changed forever. And as she played quietly in the empty recital hall that evening, her hands moving over the keys with grace and emotion, Lena understood something profound. Music was never just notes and rhythms. It was life itself, memory, love, loss, hope, and joy. And she had finally found her way back to it. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were wonderful, but the true reward was something deeper. It was the feeling of being alive, of reclaiming a part of herself that had been hidden for too long. And for Lena, that was the greatest music of all. After the recital, the school felt like a different place. Lena, once the quiet woman in the hallways, was now admired and respected by students, teachers, and even parents. People stopped her to ask questions, compliment her playing, and share how moved they had been by her performance. It was overwhelming at first, but Lena carried herself with the same humility she had always had. She smiled politely, answered questions gently, and quietly returned to her work when she needed to. Yet inside, something had changed. The music that had been hidden for so long was now part of her daily life again. Every time she walked past the piano, her fingers itched to play, and every time she sat at the keys, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The teachers, especially Clara and Mr. Roberts, began to encourage her to take a more active role in the school's music program. They suggested she teach master classes for advanced students, lead workshops, and even perform at future school events. Lena hesitated at first, unsure if she wanted so much attention. She had spent so long in the background, helping quietly and avoiding notice. But slowly she realized that her gift could inspire others in ways nothing else could. One afternoon, Clara approached her again.
"Lena, some students have asked if you could teach a few lessons," she said softly.
"They're advanced students and they're eager to learn from you." Lena looked at her hands, then at the polished keys of the piano. She felt a small flutter of nervousness. I don't know," she said quietly. "I've never taught like that before. I don't know if I can." Clara smiled gently. "You've already taught more than you realize. Every time you played for us, you showed them what dedication, patience, and emotion look like. You've inspired them without even trying. Imagine what you could do if you helped them intentionally." Lena nodded slowly, thinking about it. The idea of guiding young musicians, helping them avoid mistakes she had made, and sharing her passion filled her with a quiet joy. Perhaps this was the next chapter she had been waiting for. The first lesson was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Lena prepared the small practice room carefully, arranging chairs, placing sheet music neatly on the stands, and even polishing the keys of the piano until they shone. When the students arrived, she greeted them with a calm smile. "Welcome," she said softly. "Today we're going to focus on technique and emotion. Music isn't just about playing the right notes. It's about telling a story, expressing what you feel, and connecting with the listener. Let's begin." The students watched her carefully as she demonstrated scales, showing how each note could have different dynamics, how pauses could change the meaning of a phrase, and how emotion could flow naturally through the music. She guided them patiently, correcting posture, hand position, and timing. Unlike other teachers, she didn't rush, didn't demand perfection. Instead, she encouraged, explained, and inspired confidence. By the end of the session, the students were smiling, their eyes shining with newfound understanding. They realized that Lena's quiet demeanor hid a depth of experience, wisdom, and talent that went far beyond technical skill. She had lived the music, and that life experience made her guidance unique and invaluable. Word of Lena's lessons spread quickly. More students wanted to learn from her, and soon she found herself teaching several sessions each week. She developed a reputation not just as a pianist, but as a mentor who could bring out the best in each student. Her humility and kindness made her approachable, while her talent and dedication earned deep respect. Meanwhile, the school began to invite her to perform at special events. At first, Lena felt nervous. Performing in front of a large audience had always been daunting. But each time she played, she felt a sense of freedom, joy, and connection that words could not describe. She realized that performing wasn't just about impressing others. It was about sharing a part of herself, telling a story, and inspiring anyone who listened. One evening, she was invited to perform at a charity concert for the local community. The hall was filled with people of all ages, and Lena could feel their curiosity as she walked onto the stage. The piano awaited her, familiar and comforting. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly. Each note carried emotion, each phrase told a story. The audience was captivated, moved by the depth of feeling in her performance. Some listeners had tears in their eyes, others leaned forward, completely absorbed. By the time the last note faded, the hall erupted in applause. Lena stood quietly, bowing gently, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. After the concert, people approached her, thanking her for sharing her gift. A young woman said softly, "Your music made me feel like I was part of a story. Thank you." A father said, "I've never heard my daughter play with such passion until I watched you today. You've inspired her and so many others." Lena smiled humbly, feeling a quiet warmth in her chest. For the first time, she understood the true impact of her music. It wasn't just about skill or recognition. It was about connection, inspiration, and sharing a piece of herself with the world. As the weeks passed, Lena's life transformed in quiet but meaningful ways. She no longer felt invisible. She had students who looked up to her, teachers who valued her opinion, and an audience that appreciated her talent. Yet she remained humble, balancing her teaching, performing, and the simple tasks she had always done with care. She never let the admiration change who she was at her core. One morning, as she prepared for another lesson, a student asked, "Miss Lena, why didn't you tell us before that you were so talented?" Lena smiled softly, her fingers brushing over the keys. "Sometimes life takes you on a different path. I had to focus on other things. But what matters is not how long you've hidden something, but what you do when you're ready to share it." The student nodded thoughtfully, understanding more than she could say. Lena's story began to inspire others beyond the school. Parents talked about her to friends, students shared her lessons and performances on social media, and soon she received invitations to perform at local events, festivals, and even other schools. Each time she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, but she also felt proud. Proud not of herself, but of the journey she had taken, of the obstacles she had overcome, and of the music that had survived every challenge. Through it all, Lena never lost her humility. She remembered the years she had spent quietly helping others, the sacrifices she had made, and the life she had led away from the piano. Those years had shaped her, and she honored them by staying grounded, kind, and patient. Her story became a lesson for her students, showing them that true talent is not measured by immediate recognition, but by persistence, resilience, and the courage to share one's gift. One evening, after a long day of lessons and a small performance at a local community center, Lena sat at the piano in the empty recital hall. The room was silent, the lights dimmed, and the polished keys gleamed under the soft glow. She began to play, letting her hands move freely, her mind and heart completely immersed in the music. The notes carried her memories, her joys, her sorrows, and her triumphs. She played not for applause, not for recognition, but for herself and for the music that had always been part of her soul. With each phrase, she felt a sense of completion, as if every chapter of her life had led to this moment. As the final note faded, Lena leaned back, her eyes closed, and let out a quiet sigh. She felt peaceful, fulfilled, and ready for whatever the future held. She had reclaimed her music, inspired others, and embraced a new chapter in her life. She realized that talent, courage, and humility could change not only her own life but the lives of everyone around her. And so, Lena continued her journey. She taught, performed, and shared her gift, always staying true to herself. The woman who had once been quiet and humble, working in the background, had found her voice again. Her music, her story, and her heart touched countless lives, leaving a legacy that would be remembered long after the applause had ended. Through every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every fear she faced, Lena learned that it was never too late to reclaim one's dreams. And in doing so, she showed the world that courage, passion, and humility are the truest forms of greatness. The piano remained her companion, her voice, and her bridge to the world. Every time she played, she reminded herself and everyone who listened that the beauty of life can be expressed in music, and the courage to follow one's heart can create magic that lasts forever.